I just wanted to share a little bit about my journey with you guys. I think I can relate to some of you in the path that you are on because I was here, I sat in these chairs, and it's been a fun journey to see how God has led me, maybe even professionally. But what I'm kind of on now and am passionate about is just kind of the journey of generosity and how God is leading and guiding in that. And that's why I really like the topic of this class of faith and money. Like, how does it really work out? You know, with an integration seminar, what are we doing to make this stuff really flush out in the real world, and how does that work? I'm an accountant by trade, CPA. I see some of you in this class that I attempted to teach Principles of Accounting 1, 2, and you're still here, so that means you didn't flunk out. That's awesome. And a couple of you guys I know are graduating soon. We're in my Accounting Information Systems class, so that's pretty fun. For those of the rest of you that eyes glaze over when you hear the word accounting, don't worry, not too many of my examples include that today. But I did kind of, a little bit about my journey is I graduated from here, 1998. I went to work for one of the largest, well, the largest at the time, accounting firm in the world, which was Arthur Andersen. And it ties in a little bit with the topic today. But I did that for about 4 years, loved it, did the whole CPA route, really enjoyed that. But then the firm itself fell apart because of some honesty issues. And fast forward, I actually went to work for a church and have been now for 10 years at Calvary Church of Santa Ana as their executive pastor of administration, kind of doing the behind the scenes stuff. So I've been able to take what I learned in my CPA short career, 4 years, and kind of apply that toward the church. And now I do everything from, I just came from a meeting, we're building a new nursery and we picked the cabinet door heights, you know. So there's all kinds of exciting stuff that goes with it. Earlier today, I was at a Barnabas group meeting, which is a group of professional business guys that are, and women that are figuring out how to make their faith their own and invade the marketplace and do it with, come alongside startup ministries and help them grow and write business plans for them. And so for those of you that are business majors in here, I would encourage you to check out master's program, Barnabas Group, some of these organizations whose goal is to come alongside and help and use your gifts and experience that you're going to start developing as you get into the workforce to then apply it to encouraging and growing some of these other nonprofits that have a great vision but maybe don't have the support to come alongside afterwards. So it's been a really fun ride. I love my job because you never know what the day is going to bring. It's always crazy. And one of the things that we're dealing with a lot is, you know, how do we instill the culture of stewardship and generosity within our church? From kids to people thinking about their estate plan and what they should do in that capacity too, to leave a legacy for the kingdom instead of the government, because they just don't spend it as well, in my humble opinion. But I won't get too political on election day. I'll just move on. But one of the reasons how God got me into working in ministry and using my gifts and the business side of things in ministry was because of the dishonesty of some people. So let me tell you a little bit about the Enron story, and then we'll move into a couple other topics of what I just wanted to share today is just some lessons that I've learned, some things that I've seen in my short 36-year life of things God has taught me along the way in growing in my journey of generosity. But I also want it to be participatory, so feel free to stop me, ask questions anytime. Wow, a cookie. All right. Now he's bribing me. Give more money to Biola. Oh, wait, the generosity thing. So with Arthur Andersen, kind of the story for those of you that aren't super familiar with it was it's actually the first time in history that a partnership, it was a bunch of accounting firm partners, it was a company of 85,000 employees that made $11 billion a year worldwide, so at their peak. And they were a partnership, and one of the partners did some things that the government decided to prosecute him for. And instead of just prosecuting him individually, they actually prosecuted the whole entire firm. So it was the first time that they had actually prosecuted a whole firm for the actions of one person. And actually 4 years later, you found out that the Supreme Court exonerated him and said there isn't actually enough evidence to implicate him or the partnership. But by that time, the whole company had gone bankrupt. By the time the Justice Department had moved along and done that. So the actions of one guy caused 85,000 people to lose their jobs, including me, but I'm not bitter. It actually was a good move. God used it to kick me out the door into something that I love, so that was pretty cool. But it was interesting just to kind of step back and see, because once the accounting firm was under prosecution by the Justice Department, people started going, well, can we trust the integrity of the accounting firm? And basically what an accounting firm does when you get an audit, they say, the books that you've said you have, the cash that you have, the property that you have, all of that, we vouch that it's appropriate. And you're playing by the set of accounting standards that everybody else is. So that way, when you go and look at Apple's books and you compare them to Dell, you know they're playing by the same rules. And so you can go, okay, if this guy's audited and this guy's audited, they're following the same rules. This guy made X billion dollars a year. This guy made X billion dollars a year. Their profit is XX. Which do I want to invest in, right? You've got to be able to trust the system. And so essentially, when the audit firm was questioned on its integrity, did they really do the right thing in this instance with Enron, then people say, well, I don't necessarily want them to be the name on my company's audit firm, so we're going to go somewhere else. And then boom, instantly, they lost pretty much all their clients within, months. And so you can't just say, well, we're sorry, we might have made a mistake, or maybe we were a little bit dishonest or something like that. It's no big deal, we'll get it fixed. And in fact, they came out with a press release that said, we just found out that we may have shredded some documents that could have some information on it that might be pertinent to this case, but we don't know. Now, accounting firms shred documents all the time. Clients give you all kinds of junk and you have to look through it and you're like, that's not helpful. And you pitch it and you shred it. So the partner had said to his team, why don't you guys make sure that we're in compliance with our document destruction policy, which meant shred everything that you don't need. And it just happened at the same time right before the SEC guys came in and the FBI raided to get the stuff that they needed from the company. So there was a little bit of questionable timing. And so that was all it was, that question in integrity. And there's a couple other issues, but not huge ones, not stuff that other firms weren't doing. It kind of shrouded that whole thing. And so there just wasn't any honesty there. And it led to the downfall. Like I said, 85,000 people losing their jobs is kind of a big oops. Sorry. Not normally what you want to hear. So it is important that as we kind of see how God wants to develop some of these character qualities and values and stuff with us, like how do we live these things out and how does it really apply? And there are ramifications for things that don't go how he intends. So I've read the books that you guys are reading in this class, and I think there's some good, challenging questions that come from it. And the starting point for me is just realizing that we're all stewards. God owns it all. None of it's ours, and we're giving it back to him, essentially, when we do give. And And I've just had my perspective changed on this over time since I was here. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad's a pastor. I had good models of generosity in my life. But it's one of those things that just kind of keeps developing. It's hard to figure out. There's some tough issues and questions that come up with it. I recently just sold my house 2 days ago and am buying another one. And some of you have even been there. It was a great house. I loved it. But that was a real tension and struggle for me. Like, how much is enough? How much bigger of a house do I need to buy? And so I'd say certain things, God will push me one direction and then I'll react a different way. And it's a constant kind of learning and struggle. So quick question, how many of you guys are rich? Wow, nobody. You're like, have you seen my bill for this place? Rick is. He's rolling in the dough. No, but if you kind of have a broader perspective on it, some of the stats I was reading the other day was more than 1 billion people in the world don't have a full meal each day. So that's, a sixth of the world. If you spent more than $250 on anything today, more than 3 billion people, almost half the world's population, live on less than that. If you turned on a faucet or drinking fountain, 1.2 billion people lack access to reliable water. If you read the syllabus for this class, it was pretty big too, by the way.
It's very questionable if some of you read the syllabus.
It's quite large. No, I mean, 1 billion people in the 21st century couldn't read. Are you on track to get a bachelor's degree in 4 years or 40 years? Some of you are in different paths. That's okay. But 1 in 4 Americans aged 25 and older have attained a bachelor's degree. And this is interesting. Here's a little Biola plug. Average annual earnings for someone with a 4-year degree was $46,000. And over an adult's working life, people with at least a bachelor's degree earn an average of $2.1 million compared to $1.2 million for high school graduates. So there you go. And since Biola only costs $1.1 million, you come out ahead. So you're good. But no, I mean, if you own a car, you're richer than 89% of the people in the world. If you have food in your fridge and roof over your head and a place to sleep, even though if you live in Emerson, it's questionable. But you're richer than 75% of this world. So if you have a job that makes more than $5,000 per year, you're wealthier than the world's average income and higher than 85% of the world's population, even if you just make minimum wage. So we're all wealthy, like when you put it globally into perspective. And the question is, what do we do with that? Any ways that or times that you guys have felt rich? Yes.
Yeah. Over the summer, I was just eating out different restaurants, and at the end of the week, I'd spent like $140 in 1 week.
Yeah.
I just have $140 that I can just lavish on fine dining.
Yeah.
I have food at home that I just let rot.
Right. No. That's any other examples of when you were like, yeah, I feel rich? Obviously not during registration, but I mean other times.
So this entire week.
Yeah. I know it always hits me when I'm in a third world country or somewhere else, and you just look at kind of that perspective. And I think that's one of the things that helps with generosity is just getting outside of the bubble, getting outside of California, just going to Mexico. It's only a couple hours away, and just kind of experiencing, wow, we are blessed. We really are rich, even though you've got big bills to pay. You don't have jobs. Can't even find jobs at Starbucks anymore. The economy's so horrible. But that's here. Everywhere else in the world, people are just fighting to stay alive. So it kind of changes your perspective a little bit. Well, I wanted to show you one of the things I've learned we're rich. I mean, I've I've been to over 35 countries. I've seen some wealthy, some poor. It's hard to beat the OC. Oh yeah, you can make it come back alive. In terms of even what our poorest people in the OC have, it's a lot different than what the rest of the world has. But what I wanted to challenge you guys with a little bit is thinking through now. It's a lot easier now to figure out how you want to plan for how you want to live your life than when you do have a lot of money. I encourage you, if you're thinking this way, to check out the website generousgiving.org. They have a lot of testimonies of people, and it's not just saying, I mean, I'm a pastor, I hit people up at church. I'm obviously not a speaker, they don't let me in the pulpit. But I talk to people at church a lot about giving, and it's one of the drums that I beat because I see how it impacts the church and different people. And we get all excited about kind of the tithe and should I get there and what do I do and do we tithe off our gross or off our net or what does that look like and should I tithe now when I'm in debt up to my eyeballs at Biola? How do we wrestle with that? And one of the things that I like about generous giving is it challenges you to think about extreme generosity. For example, one of the guys' videos, which I won't show you, I've showed some of the guys in my classes, his name was Alan Barnhart. And he was debating, do I go to be on the mission field or do I start a construction company? His wife wanted to go to be on the mission field. He wanted to start a construction company. They kept voting, and it was 1-1. So he finally just decided that they were going to start a construction company. But they said, well, let's set a financial end goal and see what God provides and then give the rest away. So this is not talking about just giving 10% of your income or getting to that point, striving for that. It was, how much do we need to live on, and let's give the rest away. So he started a company. He decided he was going to live on $120,000 a year. Some of you are like, I would love to have $120,000 a year right now. So it was 3 times the poverty limit in Nashville at the time. And he started a company. He had 4 kids, so he was able to provide for them with his comfortable living, decent house, nice car, nothing. He's not living in a cardboard box on La Mirada Boulevard. I don't think there is anybody there, but just in case. So he was doing this, and he decided, okay, I'll give the rest away. Well, his business grew like 10 to 20% a year for like 20 years in a row. It was just making millions of dollars hand over fist. And so he still pays himself $120,000 and gives the rest away. And he's been able to fund and sponsor all kinds of missions efforts all around the world and kind of teach his kids of how to give as well. And so there's stories like this that kind of, just turn it on the head from thinking, how much should I just give away, but how much should I actually keep? And I think that's the big question that was big for me in kind of helping me kind of move in that direction. So I wanted to show you one video, different one, about a doctor and kind of her story. She's not too much older than me and what God has taught her. So pay attention to this and then we'll keep moving. But I just love that perspective of earn like a doctor and live like a nurse. Just like, so anybody thinking about the medical field here? Nice, a few of you guys, it's great. My wife's a doctor, and so, yeah, we're struggling with that too. Like, what does that look like? How do we use the resources that God has given us to bless other people? And both of our parents are in ministry, so that's kind of interesting to be supporting your folks now. for a tax write-off. How crazy is that? But anyways, that's been kind of just a neat journey. And so I think just what I want you guys to think about is that whole question of how much is enough. And has anybody thought about that before, or come up with a number in your head, or something that you were kind of like, this is how I want to operate once I get done with here? Any stories? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to say my number.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, I thought about it.
You've come up with a, like, here's what I'll live off of.
Mainly for like when I retire, when I'm old.
Okay.
So,
Hey.
When do you want to retire?
I don't know.
You got to start working first.
55, and you're that old?
Yeah, that's really old.
Ouch. So, no. Yeah, I think it's something that I was not thinking about when I was here. I was thinking about modeling generosity, and I learned and seen that in some people's lives, and now I've seen it in more people's lives. But anybody else have a generous, like, model in your life that you're like, this is who I want to be when it comes to generosity and money? And any examples? Yeah, Lucas.
Because going into accounting, obviously, you know, like, you can be pretty profitable there.
Yeah.
Make a lot of good money, and I've always seen as, like, I have a lot of respect for the people that can go into the mission field that are called there. And, like, I would, like, talk so many times about people not having, like, the money to be able to do that, and they're in too much in debt. So, like, being able, like, I've always had the mindset of, like, being able to use my money to, like, because I don't feel like I'm called to go to there,
Mhm.
but, like, I feel like I am going to be able to have the resources to be able to support people to go and do those things. And so I've always, like, had in my mind that, like, I'm always going to support those things.
That's cool. Anybody in here wanting to go in the mission field? You got a few? So medical missionary? Nice. I'm slow, but I figured that one out. That's great. Yeah, no, so get to know Lucas. No, seriously, I was being an accounting major. A lot of my friends are now on the mission field from Biola, and it's been awesome. I've been able to visit them all around the world. And that's one of the reasons why I've been to so many countries, is just visiting Eric, who is in my class and is now in Kenya. Chris is now the CFO of Greater Europe Mission in Germany. And so Jonathan is a church planner in Lisbon. All these guys, I was on student government with some of them, and they're all over the world now. And it's been incredibly encouraging to see what God's doing in their life and how I can be a small part of supporting that, or visiting and encouraging. Or one of them, I took a whole team from our church and we went over there and helped him build his headquarters. So there's been all kinds of neat connections and stuff that you make while you're here that God uses later. And the networks and the people that he puts you in contact with, and the skills and gifts and resources he gives you, it's awesome to see how that works. But I think it's also interesting that when I ask you how many people have a generosity mentor in their life, or someone that they look up to that just does it well, not a lot of hands went up. And I think it's because, for one, we don't talk about it. For two, speaking from a church perspective, it's really true that 20% of our church gives, they say 80%. In my case, I've run the numbers, it's 78%, but close enough. We'll round up. I'm an accounting guy. So 20% of the people in the church give 80% of the money. So that means that when you're looking at Christians to look up to be mentored by in generosity, it's probably a pretty small group. If, 20% of the folks in your average church congregation are even close to being generous. The vast majority, over half of the people that give to our church, give less than a few $100s a year. And that's not uncommon at all. You think, oh wow, once I have some money, I'll give some more. But it just doesn't happen. It's not common. And so I think it's great to have people that you can kind of look up to and see money is not controlling them. My dad's a pastor, so I've kind of seen that modeled. He's never made a lot of money. Now he started his own ministry organization. But another person is actually my father-in-law too, who's Josh McDowell. Some of you guys have heard of him, written a lot of apologetic books and all of that kind of thing. I actually I was roommates with his son here at Biola, Sean. Some of you guys may have even been at Capo Valley High and had him as a teacher. Every now and then I run into people like that. But so I married my roommate's sister, so just beware, it can happen. But one of the guys that I've looked up to and seen just on the generosity side, and now I'm actually part of his family, so I see it even more, was Josh. And he's written over 125 books or something like that. It's a crazy number. But all the royalties from all of his publications, he's sold over like $50 million copies. So if you look at the royalties from all of that kind of stuff, you could actually have quite a bit of money. But he's given all the royalties away to Campus Crusade for Christ. And it's been kind of cool to see he's been in ministry 50 years now, the impact and worldwide reach of what he's been able to accomplish and how many people he's introduced to the gospel. Millions. He's spoken to over 10 million college students all over the world in 100 and some odd countries. And it's just amazing, but I think part of that is just God has used him because he's been generous and has multiplied that effect. And it's going to be neat to kind of see how that goes out. I went to their 50th anniversary celebration of the ministry, and to see how many people, just volumes of letters of people that have been changed by just him being available and him being generous with his time and treasure. So I think there are different levels, and your book talks about that. Wilmer's book talks about that, the different levels of being a steward, the marks of a mature steward. Someone that you imitate, someone that gives because it's kind of the thing to do, the conformer, like they like the tax benefits. I was a big fan of that, being an accounting major. I'm like, well, then I can give more if I can write it off, right? So I was excited. But then you move to the give in proportion to what God has given, kind of a little bit more about what the video was talking about. But part of it can get to that point where you are giving to impress someone, to get your name on a building, or I'm not going to lie, my name's in the School of Business building. I thought that was a cool idea, so I wrote a check. I even have a brick on the outside the library. I did that one too. So I was a sucker for that for a little while. And but anybody else ever given to impress anybody? They're willing to admit their pride right now in front of everybody? All right. Any good story?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. All right. No, so, I mean, there's different levels that God moves us through, and generous giver is one that recognizes how Wilmer defines is that all one owns is from God. You give of your own initiative rather than out of obligation, and you get some joy from it. Being a generous giver isn't normal. Like I said, only 20% of people, or less than that actually. And then the mature steward is one that recognizes the role of faithful steward of God's possessions. You're more concerned with treasures in heaven than on earth, and content with your daily provision. So, how do you get there? One of it is just in Malachi 3, it says, test God in this, right? I, the Lord, do not change, so you, the descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Ever since the time of your ancestors, you have turned away from the decrees and not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty. But you ask, how are we to return? Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, your whole nation, because you're robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in the house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. I will prevent pests from devouring your crops, and the vines in your fields will not drop their fruit before it's ripe, says the Lord Almighty. Then all the nations will call you blessed, for yours will be a delightful land, says the Lord Almighty. So I just encourage you guys to try it, to test God in it, in making generosity a reality in your life. And I've seen God do some crazy stuff. I'm not to the point where I'm giving away 75% of my salary or setting my total limit and giving all the rest away. I've been trying it in small increments. Like one of the things, for example, one of the financial planners in our church challenged me to give some money to our church building campaign and say, God, if you provide this much over and above that, I'll give a higher percentage of that amount to the church. So I did that, and then I got a call soon after, and Biola said, hey, do you want to teach a class? Well, so I got $200 more. No, I'm just kidding. It was a little bit better than that. No, so God provided an extra income for a time. I was like, all right, well, then I can give more of that away. And I was looking to refinance my house, and one of my relatives just gave me some money. The amount of money I was thinking about pledging to the restoration project at my church, and they just gave it to me. And that was, you're like, wow, okay. Some of these things don't add up on paper. I do have an Excel spreadsheet on how much I'm gonna give to different organizations, and it's all like calculated out, and it's very geeky, and I love it. But one of the things that didn't add up for me is it was tough when I started working at Arthur Andersen and making some decent money right out of the gates of Biola's graduation. It was a struggle. It was like, do I really want to set aside money and give it to the Lord right now and give my 10%? Or do I want to kind of save up a little bit for a house, and then I can use that for ministry, right? I can have my college small group guys over, and you start kind of rationalizing some of these things. And I decided, okay, I'll put the money aside. I want to give, at least in that. I wasn't challenged by the big generosity stuff yet. And I start saving up for the house, and I'm a little bit short for the condo that I need. I'm like, I don't know. It's been tough, man. If you think on my spreadsheet, if I maybe hadn't have given that, I would have this money right now. And then I got another check from a family person that was for the exact amount that I had given to God for the previous 4 years, and the exact amount that I needed to buy the condo that I was looking at. Like, right? It wasn't on my spreadsheet. Like, it didn't add up for an accounting guy. That's very distressing. So I decided that, all right, there's something to this. And you don't give to get, but God provides in strange ways, and he shows us interesting ways as we kind of scramble on this generosity. And I don't have it figured out. I'm struggling with it. Like I told you, I'd reel this week figuring out how big of a house do I want to buy. It's hard. I opted for a little bit bigger than I should have, but I'm hoping to do a lot of cool stuff there. So we'll see, ministry-wise. But it is a struggle back and forth. And if you can think about it, and I love that you've thought about, okay, here's a dollar amount, and if I make this, I can give the rest away or give a good chunk of it away or whatever. That's great. I want you guys to be doing that now. And if you've never given a penny, start by giving a dime. Just start anywhere and test God in it. He says to do that in Malachi. So that would be my encouragement to you. Any questions about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, giving, anything? Before I turn it back over to Rick. Yeah.
I have a question about giving when you have it all on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Do you think that how helpful is that when it comes to say you run into a homeless person or
Yeah.
immediate need comes where you're like, oh well, I already give. How do you balance the two of being profuse and giving whatever,
Right.
and knowing that you give consistently?
That it's all pre-programmed, robotic. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for me in my own life, I do actually plan to give randomly. That's really bad, too type A. But no, that there is, I know I've been serving at my church in the high school and college group for the last 15 years. And I know there's going to be people that are going on missions trips that are going to hit me up every year. So I try and make sure that I budget a chunk for that. But then I do respond to what the need is. You know, some people, you write them the smaller check, and other people, you write them the bigger check. I think running into the homeless guy, I've had both experiences. One where, yeah, God just prompts you to give. And kind of what I see the spreadsheet as is a baseline of here's what I feel like my obligation as a Christian should be, and what I'm excited to do, and the ministries I'm excited to support. But that does not mean I cannot exceed that. I just want to have something set aside so that I am planning, and it talks about that in the Bible too, to plan your first fruits and kind of put those things out there. So I want to start with that, but then I do want to be prompted by the Spirit to move in a direction and you see something. But then there are other times where I've had the guy selling magazines to benefit the YMCA come to my door, and I'm just like, I'm not feeling it. I don't need another subscription of time. And I tell him, I love what you're doing, but I already have a plan for how I'm going to give my charitable dollars, and then I don't do it. So I use it as a cop-out, especially for the firefighters fund, and the people that hit you up all the time. So there's a little bit of both, I think. But if God's moving you, and part of me also feels like working in a church, I see how hard it is for faith-based Christian organizations to raise money, and how much easier it is for the Red Cross. So I'm not as drawn to feel like I want to support the Red Cross, even though I love what they're doing with Hurricane Sandy. But I know there's other groups like Crusades Global Aid Network or things like that that are also doing stuff that are not only going to be generous, but they're going to share the message of Christ, which is what it's all about. So you want to have the good works, but you also want to have the good news along with it. So that's kind of how I put those two together. Any other questions?
Are you and your wife on the same page when it comes to giving?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I'd say it's definitely yes, pretty close for the first answer. This is recorded, right? No, I think it's definitely something that it's been kind of neat to see. I haven't had the experience, and some of the generous giving videos, if you go watch them, they'll talk about my wife and I were praying for a number of what we should give to this organization, and we both got the same number, and it was like skywriting, and I haven't had that experience. But had something similar where there was a project that we had found out about at an organization that we both like a lot. And we were just presented with a bunch of different opportunities, and there was kind of like the $100, $200 opportunities, and then the, $1,000 opportunity, like different levels of, gift. And we both were kind of like, well, we felt like we wanted to support this cause, but we were kind of feeling each other out, like, so we do this, or what do you think? And it was kind of cool to see that God had put it on both of our hearts to go for a bigger thing. I was kind of like, well, we could kind of do this. She's like, well, I'm like, more? Yes, I want to do that. And so that was kind of cool to come to something together where we both felt led in a way that was moving in the direction together. So it's hard, especially if God makes you passionate about different things, but I've been really blessed to have someone that has been also raised with a generous family and loves to give stuff away. And so I want to celebrate how she likes giving, and she'll help support how I like giving. Now, it also helps that we have a decent income. And so we're in that spot that God has blessed us with, that we're not struggling to just buy food on the table. Money is an issue, and is one of the main issues that people discuss with marital difficulties. And so thankfully that one hasn't been for us. There's other things that we argue about, but.
Did you want to talk about that on video?
No, not at all, no. She's awesome, I love my wife. Yes.
Do you have a system, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a formal one, but like an informal system or whatever for how you make decisions concerning that kind of budgeting, or like what exactly you'll spend your money on, or
Just
whatever?
budgeting in general, or the giving side, or just together?
When the both of you disagree.
Yeah.
Do you have a system that you go back to, and if so, what is it?
Well, we both feel really strongly that the local church is and specifically because I work there, but we both feel very strongly that the local church we want to support a good chunk of. And then it's kind of a give and take. A lot of it is, a lot of the people that we support outside of the local church, missionaries and the like, some of them we both knew from Biola. Some of them she knows and I don't know. And so we kind of pick a number, and then we try and be pretty equitable. So like we'll have a number of missionaries that we want to support, but then we've decided, okay, you can pick 3 or 4, I'll pick 3 or 4, and we'll kind of give them all the same. And then with our parents, we kind of support them both equally. And then as they have projects or things come up, then we talk more specifically about, hey, do we want to bless them more this year? And so a little bit is trying to be semi-equitable. That helps. And part of it, it's compromise, it's give and take. But we've pooled all of our money together, put it in a bank, and said, let's give out of that. She doesn't say, well, I make twice as much as you, so I get to pick twice as many of the people. It's our money together, and I think that's also helped. It's not like this is my money, this is your money, you can decide what you want. No, we're trying to do it together. And I just celebrate the fact that she makes twice as much as I do, or more, because then we can give more and do more to bless other people with it. So it's not too formulaic, but it's definitely a conversation. And it's part of it is just, I realize just in being married, I've only been married like 3 years, you just realize how selfish you really are. And so we both have the heart that generosity is important. So it's not as much of a fight over, I want to be more generous. No, you. Kind of a thing, So we're both, the goal is great. And so it's just kind of getting to that. And I handle more of the finances because I like that kind of thing, and she doesn't. So she'll just ask me, well, can we afford to do that? Or is that something, that God's calling us to do together? Is it going to work? Yes, it will work. She'll say, are we going bankrupt? No. Okay, then do it. Is kind of her attitude. So she's very supportive in that, which is nice.
Well
Anything
done.
else? Oh, one more.
Please.
About like fundraising for missions.
Yes.
I went on the YWAM trip, and
Cool.
fundraising for me was like pulling teeth. Like I hated doing it.
Yes, most people do.
Yeah. And this has been encouraging, and just to be like in this class and recognize that people are already like planning to give, and so it blesses them by being able to.
Right. Kind of what Lucas was talking about.
Yeah, but just as far as like you and your wife, like what do you appreciate as far as like missionaries coming to you and asking, or is there a philosophy about like being supported by the local church, or how do you see that?
No, that's a great question. And we struggle with that a little bit at the local church level. Calvary Church specifically gives about 30% of the money that comes in the door to missions, which is actually quite a high percentage for a lot of churches. So they helped found Wycliffe. They've, a lot of people involved from the beginning. We're an 80-plus-year-old church. So it's got this long history and tradition of giving to missions. And so we struggle with that because the older generation would just say, give it to the church, put it in a pot, let them decide who to support and how the missions philosophy should work. Your generation says, I want to give to a really, really specific cause and see my dollars go in action right now, right away. I don't want to just give it to the church and the church says, trust us, we'll spend it. And so part of that is just, it's tough because it's a very individualized kind of mentality. And so it's really hard for me at the church we've got 90 missionaries that we're supporting on a monthly basis all over the world. And so I have to figure out, how do we communicate the cool stuff that God is doing through all their ministries to excite people to give and support them, while making sure that the people that are really, really good about asking for money have the slick PowerPoint presentations and the kid crying in Africa. That's great. Like, you need that, but then you have another guy that's the back office accountant, that supports all the work, or the pilot that's flying all the missionaries around in South America. And those aren't as sexy of jobs to raise money for. And so they're really struggling. And so it's, how do you balance that out? Because it all has to happen to make Christ's cause move forward. What I think you're talking about is actually raising the money, going out short-term trips and things like that, and actually asking people for it. And do you feel bad about putting, the opportunity in front of someone? And I would say no. I don't mind. I never have felt bad about someone. Are they too pushy? Did they ask too much? Did they, you just have to put it out there and see what God does, because you don't want to squelch His Spirit from giving someone else the opportunity to support you. Now, you get all the time, right? I'm going on a missions trip. Oh yeah, I'll pray for you. Like, how many times have you said that? Now, if you give them $100, how much more likely do you think you'll be that you're actually going to pray for them? You'll remember it. Your money, your heart follows. And so I encourage you guys, even if it's just a little bit, any of your friends that are going, give them $20, give them $100, whatever you can do. It will remind you. You're like, yeah, I had to give up Starbucks for a whole week to give this person money to go to Guatemala. I'll remember it. And you actually will pray for them and see what happens. And so there are people out there that just get great joy out of giving. And so you never want to feel like, if you're asking them for money to further the kingdom, that you should apologize for that anyway. But it all comes out of relationship. So when you know them and understand them and have seen what kind of relationship, and you trust them and you see what God's doing through their life and ministry, people want to support that, and they're excited to do that, and you want to give them the opportunity to do that. And growing up, one thing I realized, most of the people that didn't have the money were a lot more generous than the ones you think were when you come up with your list of who should I hit up for this thing. So you want to ask everybody and see what God does. You don't want to limit Him. Now, you don't want to be crazy and like streamers and banners and beat people over the head with Bibles in the courtyard or something, but not that I've ever seen that, but that would be cool. Yeah, right. No, but that's a great question.
Let's thank Michael. Appreciate it.
All right.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.